You think you're doing a good deed by giving the largest continent on Earth one category? Great job, Grammys. You're being so inclusive. BTS was never a group of Asian liberators. They were artists. Tyler, the Creator, was never a rap MC. He says he's a genre-bending musician. Eminem wasn't a white guy in a black field. He was just a rapper. Welcome to your personal music therapy, where I pair pop culture with psychology lessons. This week we're going to be talking about the Grammys, or labeling theory, and how it applies to the Grammys. Labeling theory is a concept from sociology that I'm lending to explain this topic better and to explain to you why it is so detrimental to use all of these different categories that the Grammys are currently bringing around. But this is not my first time writing about racism in music. Actually, I've written about racism in music 4 times already across 2 years. Grammys 4 times? We're still here. I feel like as a Gen Z, I have to put a finger on these things. This is me trying to be a little bit of an activist because I don't want to have to see this all throughout my entire life. I'm sick of it already. I don't want to be 50 and still talk about these topics. I want to fix it. So here's my attempt at it. The title of the article is Racism in Music, Globalization versus the Industry, on decolonization, labeling, and how the Grammys puts another nail in their coffin. This is the Mugcast, a cozy listen to pair with your coffee. I'm Hannah. I'm a speech therapist and writer online on Medium. I write articles about different pop culture topics and specifically highlight artists whenever they come out with new music, and I connect these music dots with psychology lessons. Recently, I also dropped my first book, which is called Facing Away, and it's about the journey of moving abroad as a woman and finding yourself. So if you're interested in that, the link is down in the description. As is a ritual for this podcast, I'm going to be wearing my pretentious glasses. I don't know why I did that. I'm apologizing. Sometimes the crazy slips out. This video has 4 sections that I'm going to try to include over here. So the first section will be Boxes are for toys and not idiots, where I explain the concept of boxing culture and why humans put things into categories in the first place. The second section will focus on are demographics a music genre now, which they're not, spoiler. The third section will focus on the history of racist categories at the Grammys. The fourth part will be labeling theory and social stigma. So this is where we're going to go into sociology and we're going to learn about psychological concepts and findings and research that underline why it is so bad to keep putting people into categories. With these 4 chapters, you can navigate through the article or just follow along with me. The article is going to be linked down below. You can make highlights over there, or you can take notes under the article, which I find is quite nice. And you can also shoot me a message over there if you want to. So let's get into today's piece. The date for the newest meeting of Olympus in the music industry has been announced. February 7th, 2027. The Grammys. And with it, the Recording Academy has made some significant changes. Finally, there will be more recognition for songwriters, which is very important. If you don't know about the songwriter dilemma, go research it. Alongside more access for digital releases, and last but not least, there were 5 new categories that the Grammys are introducing. The first one is Best Asian Pop Performance, second, Best R&B Collaboration, Best Traditional Pop Vocal Performance, Best Traditional Folk Album, and Best Latin Song. And they were all added to represent international music better. Excuse my cynicism, but why does it have a sour aftertaste to keep creating race-coded music categories, of which Asian pop performance is just a very horrible recent example, especially after Bad Bunny won Album of the Year as the first non-English major category win in 68 years. The world as we know it is an ever-shrinking concept in our globalized world, and the industry is suddenly faced with the reality that music all over the world demands a fair share of this attention. Dare I say, I smell some racism. And God forbid, I'm even more prudent, because I have been saying this for years now. Creating new categories for international music doesn't make you more inclusive. It just means you aren't ready to let all the music take a piece of the big cake. True equity would address how the votes are cast, not cast more molds. Thus, here is an open letter from a speech therapist, aka me, to the Recording Academy. I want to tell them why their approach to inclusivity is truly misguided, and I will do that by giving them a lecture on language and sociology that they should have taken. First chapter. Boxes are for toys and idiots. This is not the first time I've brought pen to paper to lament the subject of racism in the industry, especially when it comes to award ceremonies. They are often portrayed as the gold standard for music in the entire world, and while back in the day it was easy to excuse that they excluded any non-English music, today it is evidently just racist. Maybe the Recording Academy is even a little glottophobic at this point. Glottophobic meaning the fear of language. Bad Bunny was certainly a rude awakening to both big label executives and award ceremonies. Back in November 2024, I wrote an article titled How the West is Gatekeeping Audible Art, in which I discussed the fact that labels such as K-pop, J-rock, and Mandopop are linguistic labels that divide rather than unite music. I already talked about the concept of labeling and boxing as I explained how Asian pop was often given a label according to language, just to be put in a smaller box on the shelf. The fact is that these boxes are completely synthetic concepts. They're only made for the micro mental abilities of humans to grasp things more easily or to understand where something fits. Boxing or labeling is an attempt to simplify things when they're actually far more complicated. It is all music and art, so why should we be so nationalistic about it? No one ever thought of US pop or UK pop for some reason. The sad truth is big concepts are easier to swallow. If we create a box labeled normal and another box labeled others, we can more easily sort what is popular and not popular. It's the same idea with pop culture or pop music. Extra categories at large music awards and individualized labels for music in different languages prove this problem. They raise awareness of the fact that they are a deviation from the norm, a deviation from English. Labeling allows us to assign mental boxes to concepts. Once a band lands in such a smaller box, its audience will forever be limited to people making an effort to pull that box from the bottom of the rack, de-dust it, and open it up. Even as a small Austrian girl, I noticed that weirdly, German rap, which is huge in Austria, and Austropop, which is one of the biggest pop categories, they exist and they are home to amazing music. But most of the world will naturally never hear those tunes. For the same reason, Taiwanese artists are singing on a beach in Kanting for every spring, and it goes virtually unnoticed by the entire rest of the world. However, when there's Coachella in the middle of the desert, the world knows. So how weird is it that the world is globalizing, but the only music that we're keeping is US music? I grew up under the basic assumption that to be a big star, you had to sing in English, which at the same time came with sneers from the Austrian community for abandoning your roots. I was raised with this imbalance so naturally, I only questioned it when I realized that actually there's no significant reason why a girl born in LA should be awarded a golden gramophone and endless radio plays, while a talented musician from virtually anywhere else on the globe never even gets the chance to board a plane, especially if they use a different language. Let's get into chapter 2. Are demographics now a music genre? Let me be clear about something. There's nothing wrong with genre-based categories per se. They manage to shed light on musical expressions that the current notion of pop can maybe sometimes not encompass. These are, if done right, awards that are based on musicality, and they allow artists in a certain niche to receive recognition. And this should be the point of any new category being introduced, right? To help new artists get access to this category, or to the Grammy Awards in general. The wrong assumption here is that language is a genre, because countries and languages are not simply more niche listeners. Music is known to be applauded for transcending languages. So if ever one is to say K-pop needs a category because the fan base is smaller, which is bullshit in and of itself, that is a limiting belief within a brain that has already established a hierarchy, based on the fact that colonialism has rendered English a lingua franca. Lingua franca here meaning a language that everybody speaks, the common tongue, the common language. Reminder, English is a lingua franca, not an imperial language anymore, or so I would presume. Though any footprints that the Recording Academy leaves suggest the latter to be true. Additionally, because languages are notoriously difficult to locate, given that they often cross borders, the Grammys just opted for the simplest and dumbest alternative: geography. The new Asian performance category makes matters even more absurd, as it expresses how the Recording Academy has absolutely no geographical understanding of the size and plurality of Asia, encompassing everything between East Russia, Japan, Kazakhstan, India, Indonesia, Bangladesh, Philippines, Vietnam, Taiwan. Korea is just a part of it, without ever naming any of these languages and countries' musical heritages, their genres, and their languages. Having lived in Asia for 3 years, I can tell you there's so many things to know and learn, and to just call it an Asian performance category is like, you think you're doing a good deed by giving the largest continent on earth one category? Also, to call it an act of shining light on smaller artists is frankly wrong, because K-pop isn't small and there's already an unfair distribution of music attention across Asia. The rationale of this award still operates on the pro bono mindset by giving them a room, even though it's the back room, but they can be grateful they're at the table at all. I can almost guarantee to you that no artist now feels empowered because they have a new chance at winning the Grammys. This is not an Asian performance category. This is a new playground for big labels like HYBE, YG, JYP, and SM Entertainment, the big four labels in Korea if you don't know. I applaud HYBE, YG, JYP, and SM for sending their people to the US, to the Recording Academy, putting them on the votes, because that's the only way that they can change the rigid system that's in place. But to create an Asian performance category that we all know will probably only foster K-pop for the time being, that feels like the Recording Academy was giving those four labels a little treat. It increases the uneven distribution of accreditation of Asian music, and if anything, it fosters envy among Asian artists, if they ever were envious before, because basically I can tell you most Taiwanese artists probably don't expect to be at the Grammys ever. Great job, Grammys! You're being so inclusive. Now let's get to Chapter 3, the history of racist categories at the Grammys. And I'm just taking the most recent part here because this is a very long history that goes back all the way to when they first founded the category hip-hop, late 1980s, early 1990s. They started coming up with these genre-based categories, and ever since then, people have been complaining about this. The main contender for this new category, the Asian performance category, is BTS, a group of 7 Korean men who are essentially two things: rappers and singers. They were never Asians, but they were required to label themselves as K-pop idols, as that was the persona their label attempted to sell. So yes, they're also performers, as much as any other artist performing on a stage. Basically, they're 7 musicians who might receive an award not for rapping or singing, but for a geographical construct that the Recording Academy deems logical, despite that not even being their nationality. It's as if I was to receive an award for being a European singer, and I'm like, huh? In 2021, 2022, and 2023, BTS was nominated for the Best Pop Duo and Group Performances for the songs Dynamite, Butter, and My Universe. All 3 times they didn't win. In 2024, Apate by Bruno Mars and Rosé was nominated for Song of the Year and for Record of the Year alongside other nominations. Guess what? They didn't win. In 2025, Golden from K-pop Demon Hunters was nominated for the Song of the Year amongst other categories. They didn't win the Song of the Year, but at least they won Best Song Written for Visual Media as the first K-pop song ever. Which again, Golden was arguably one of the biggest songs in 2025. It was everywhere. And to give it this like side category win is like, yes, great, thank you for the win, but like, aren't we all agreeing that this was the Song of the Year? 2025 is the same year that Bad Bunny's Debí Tira Más Fotos became the first non-English big category win in 68 years. All this is confusing given that the first ever Grammys were swept away by a guy called Domenico Mondugno singing a song Nel blu dipinto di blu. And this song is completely in Italian. So the first ever Grammys went to a guy singing in Italian. But this inequality at the Grammys has been called out many times before. For instance, very clearly by Tyler, the Creator, who, upon actually receiving a Grammy, found much clearer words for the constant reinventing of new categories at the Grammys. He said, and I'm quoting, "Whenever a guy that looks like me does anything genre bending, they always put us in a rapper or urban category. And I don't like that urban category. It is just a politically correct way to say the N-word to me." When I hear that, I'm like, why can't we just be pop? Half of me feels like the rap nomination was a backhanded compliment. Ooh, Tyler. Ouch. The thing is that against Black musicians winning big categories, the Recording Academy could easily abuse these genre titles, which eventually led to weird phenomena like Eminem, who was then drafted up as a hero for coming up as a white rapper in a Black community. And I'm not saying this as any shade towards Eminem. I love Eminem. His hero's arc became an origin story for defying racial boundaries that wouldn't be there if large industry powerhouses like the Recording Academy didn't engrave them on their golden award plaques. Arguably, BTS laughing and hugging when not winning the awards might be up to interpretation. But even for a non-face-saving culture like the US, the veil over their own racism is thin and perfectly translucent. Even a creation-focused artist like Min Yoongi, the rapper Suga from BTS, must be a little scoffy over never ever being named as part of the rap community. This is weird because his first rap album, D-Day was the first in history to sell over 1 million copies of an album in one single day. And yet, he will never have the hero's arc that Eminem had. In fact, none of the 3 rappers of BTS will ever have Eminem's hero's arc. Why does this genre bending exchange only ever seem to go one way? A white guy can rap, but an Asian guy cannot. An African American guy can rap, but he cannot sing a pop ballad. An international group like Cat's Eye can become major in K-pop, but a new, amazing Korean artist cannot win Artist of the Year in a pop category. It almost appears as if it never was about the genre and the categories in the first place. Now let's get into Chapter 4, Labeling Theory and Social Stigma. Sociological research found that among 2 patients with the same psychological symptoms, one who is told he's mentally ill and the other doesn't carry that label, so the other doesn't know he's mentally ill, the person with the label has to recover not just from the symptoms, but also from the stigma that the label created. The reason for this is that people who are labeled as deviant in any sense of the word also become deviant. It is like clinical evidence for the idea of self-fulfilling prophecy. The thing about labels is that they are not in and of themselves harmful. According to social reaction theory, society, or those with power in a society, determines the impact of a label on the individual. In mental health, for instance, if a deviation from a social norm is perceived as hierarchically lower, the people with the label would be assigned to therapy. This happens to kids with lisp, for instance. Though there is no physical negative effect of a protruding tongue when forming an S sound, we still perceive them and send them to therapy. Thus, a famous saying in sociological research of mental health is, mental illness is created and sustained by society itself. This suggests that labels become mentally challenging when they are attached to negative social perception. These theories apply across human qualities. Researchers make a difference here between salient categories like gender or culture, or non-salient categories like the preference of food. Labels are there to separate us from them, and are a natural human response within the concept of out-of-group bias, which is a sort of evolutionary survival mechanism that seeps through the cracks of our modern lives. Labels trigger emotional responses, and the level or shape of the following stigma depends on the narrative perpetuated by those in power who are directing society. There are several ways to deal with labels. The first is deflecting them, which means to assure yourself that this is only part of who you are, and you choose to shift your focus to another part of yourself. The polar opposite is challenging the labels by either educating or confronting the people who put the label on you. The further the distance to the person you're educating or challenging, like if they're not your uncle but they're your fan base, the more effortful this process of educating will be. If we shift the focal point of labeling theory from mental health, which is the example I've been giving up until now, to another highly salient human characteristic, namely demographics, or the place of origin, which is what the Recording Academy is doing right now, those who are now labeled can also use these same mechanisms to deal with the label. They can deflect or challenge. Tyler, the creator, in his speech, chose to challenge. BTS, thus far, clearly chooses to deflect, at least so far. They ensure that their fandom, ARMY, which has become a global audience with many different social norms to adhere to, is still unified. Challenging the perception by educating without splintering the fandom would be very, very difficult. And so the mental health strain might be placed on those members inside the group who feel in charge of speaking up. And now they have to keep it locked up or deflected when their natural reaction would be to challenge it. But as Viktor Frankl says, it's not suffering that causes human stress, but it's suffering without meaning. And on whatever scale you measure it, even without the Grammys or without ever winning a Grammy, BTS's impact is meaningful on $1 million, millions of lives impacted type of scale. And this might be the only condolence about racism in music at the moment. Not even the Recording Academy can stop the globalization in music. The irony is, I don't even know where I belong either. I've lost my salient label. I always felt wrong living in Austria. I felt like I didn't fit in. I never truly fit in Taiwan either, and though I love Korea, I would have to be severely blind to think that this is the one and only place for me to be. Yet, I have learned a lesson on belonging that the Recording Academy repeatedly ignores. Belonging to a category or label can only ever be fairly determined by the one carrying it. And like most humans, you and I and any artist alike, we have many labels. But that is okay as long as we're not forced into any singular identity that we do not hold personally. BTS was never a group of Asian liberators. They were artists. Tyler, the creator, was never for instance, I speak Chinese daily, and though it's not a flex when I'm living in Taiwan, no one would ever label my daily failures in ordering a coffee an Asian performance. But according to the category's qualification, if I sang my coffee the order in Chinese and had it be produced by Max Martin maybe, I would stand a serious chance of winning the Asian performance category at the Grammys. A feminim, if you will, rapping over milk foam and bubble tea just to prove how perverted the idea of needing superficial categories for arts really is. Now, if you stuck with me the entire time, thank you so much for your attention. Thank you for making it through the entire video. You can read more of my writing on Medium under Hannah's Cafe or follow me on Instagram or Threads, also Hannah's Cafe, for more cozy content and updates. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and follow the podcast, share it with a fellow coffee lover, and let me know in the comments which topic I should be tackling next. I hope you had a nice cappuccino with this episode, and I'm sending a warm hug from my mug to yours. Hope to see you soon somewhere on Hannah's Cafe. Bye bye!